Thanks, everybody. Welcome back to Only Negotiations in the News. And last week we talked about the NIL and its impact on the college game, and perhaps some of the things that are coming up on this episode, which is the NFL draft, which is happening in a week. And we thought we'd get ahead of some things. I've got with me Gerry Parran and Joshua Weiss, and we're going to put some negotiation spin on what we're seeing in the news. So with that, welcome, guys.
Thank
Hi,
you,
Mike. Hi, Joshua.
Hey, Gerry, how you doing?
Yeah.
So, Gerry, now you're coming in from Chicago, right? Area, and a Chicago fan, I assume. All right, and you got a big move that happened there. And Josh, you are up there in New England with another Super Bowl run prepping team.
Yeah.
And I'm in Spain now, but I live in Denver, Colorado, where we also had a very nice run, unexpected, probably ahead of schedule from our perspective. And then some very different things happen for all of our teams and the league in general, as it relates to this upcoming draft and picks and moving up and down and free agency. So who's got a hot one that you thought was interesting to kind of kick things off?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to jump in here if that's all right with you guys. As I was sort of doing a little bit of research on all this, and looking at the negotiation angles, I think one thing that was interesting, a couple of things that I came across that I felt like were valuable and useful, because the draft, like I've always felt like the draft was sort of this endless series of negotiations and this master class and how do you maneuver in and around all of what's happening. And there's clearly a mix of smoke screens and competition. But I've also heard a lot of GMs say that, there are other GMs that they work with and that they have a little more trust that they've built with over time. And I think that's an interesting one, right? In a system that basically is essentially a prisoner's dilemma kind of challenge. You've got people within who are trying to find ways of cutting through the fog of the draft, if I can put it that way, right? Like all of the stuff that people put out there about their intentions, some are true and most are not true. And the question of how do you manage it? And so I think what's interesting to me is it really does come down to value, right? That teams have needs and they have value, right? That if a team needs a superstar to fill a specific role, then that's one kind of perspective on what they're going to go into a draft trying to seek, right? But there are other teams, and let me just use the Miami Dolphins as an example, okay? Who are clearly rebuilding.
Again,
I believe they have 6 picks in the first 100. Excuse me. And so what they need is volume, right? Like they need a lot of guys. They don't need a superstar because a superstar isn't going to help them right now. They need 5 or 6 quality players that they can begin to groom and sort of do a rebuild around. Right?
Let me reframe what I heard you say. They got a whole bunch of C players, and instead of just getting 1A, what they need is to get 5, 6, 7 C's to become B's.
Something along those lines. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think that when it's the difference between, right, like just what we were talking about, like the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots, when you get to the Super Bowl or the AFC Championship, you're awfully close, right? You don't need volume. You need key players that you're going to plug in certain spots, right? And so that's the focus of the draft for you in one sense. Versus, thinking more like, hey, we're in rebuild mode and we've got to work on filling a number of holes. So that was the first thing that I think on some level, from my point of view, I think is an interesting way of viewing this, right? That the teams have these different needs, but it's based on what they're, where they are, what they really value and things like that.
Yeah. Well, and let's not forget that the players have some impact, both through the NIL, which we discussed last week, and the player being able to say, I'm already independently wealthy. I don't need you this year. I can sit out. But you've also got the situations like Max Crosby in the Raiders, and another rebuilding in a tough division. And here you have a superstar player saying, I got to go. I have a limited career and I want to win a championship.
Yeah.
And pop it over to Baltimore, who got him and said, yeah, we saw that physical and love the motor, love the passion, but we're going to call this trade off. What does that do to trust between two GMs who announced the deal, by the way? and then it got canceled later. That so what I heard you talking about, Joshua, is the wants versus needs, and there's the short
Yeah.
term versus long term.
Yeah.
There's a budget. You have two budgets really. You have 53 person team.
Yep.
You could have 18 draft picks, but if they're not on the field, they don't matter.
Right.
And then you got the salary cap. So you want to have a whole lot of driven, very low paid people on your team, so you can go get the one piece you need in that one specific area. And if you don't need them this year, then why do you go get that wide receiver this year? What are they going to make you from? They're going to get you two more wins. If you don't make the playoffs, those wins hurt you because now you're lower in the draft.
Right.
Not that it's suggesting anybody, takes a dive, but in the NBA, they're having a real problem with that. Gerry, what do you got going on? What are you thinking?
Well, the draft up until now, I just looked at it as kind of entertainment. I want.
Have they done a great job at that? It's not just entertaining from the Bears. The NFL, it is a thing. People pay money to go watch their team.
Oh, I know. Which is, the NFL is just, I guess we got to, say that they're the ultimate marketeers. I mean, these guys can turn anything into huge amounts of money. And like they're doing with the draft. I remember, we're all old enough when the draft, I don't know, wherever it was held, it was kind of, probably behind closed doors and you'd hear about it, but wasn't
open cigars.
Yeah. Now
drinking
it's,
scotch.
It's really, truly a marketing event. And, once I started to sort of analyze it now, just in preparation, I really gave this some thought. Besides the spectacle of it all, this is really a complex multi-table negotiation. The players are the currency. You've got the clock is the deadline. And the amounts of money that are changing hands. It shouldn't even be legal.
Well, so I'm a free American. I don't want these.
I'm only kidding, but
no, absolutely.
Everybody's
I want people to be successful. Okay, so that's it. So let's go back to one of the things in my research is going back to your wonderful Patriots. I'm not supposed to say that in Denver, but certainly built a winning franchise for a long period of time. Yeah. And one of the things about the draft specifically was it seemed like Belichick had a methodology of I will trade down.
Yeah.
No matter how mid pack because they were already good. I will trade down. I will get more picks. And he's the kind of guy who comes across as well. He's gruff, and he is what he is. Yeah. He's very consistent and authentic. So if I'm a GM and I have Belichick say, I don't care, take it or leave it. I don't think it's a bluff because I think he has a system. And if you don't want to do it, that's fine. Yeah. I'll go hire somebody. I'll go get a Kurt Warner because my system is so strong. Whether it's that guy that's 320 pounds or that guy that's 318 pounds or that guy that's 312 pounds, they're all 6'5". They all run a 4.6. As long as they will do their job, I really don't care what the name on the back of the jersey is.
Yeah, he absolutely. And it's interesting because there was some research done that said that first round draft picks were overvalued typically, right? And so he absolutely latched onto that notion. And the Patriots for years almost never had first round picks that he would always trade back, partly because of, he also at that time there wasn't the rookie salary cap. And, like now where you're picked is what dictates your salary. There's no negotiation around it, right? But back when he started doing this, he also, I think, believed that he could sign these guys for less money, right? Yeah. And then he had an easier time constructing a team around players like that than the first round pick who comes in and maybe thinks they're, all that and a bag of chips kind of, right?
Well, as far as overvaluing, I did read that up, that there's been one number one pick that went on to win the Super Bowl with the team that picked them, and that's Peyton Manning with the Colts. Other than that, there hasn't been a single instance. in all the years
It
of the drafts.
really, yeah, it really is interesting. And when you look at and when you do look at the data around, how many first round picks actually succeed, like it's pretty stunning actually that the numbers are far different than I think most people would imagine. They believe that first round picks are sort of the fail safe, and they're not.
Yeah.
And so I do think that feeds into or fed into what Belichick was doing. I mean, the one problem that Belichick had is that at a certain point he proved, and this was always my challenge with him, was that he proved that he was not the best drafter actually. Um, over time. He was great at signing free agents, but the Patriots missed on a lot of players. First round. I mean, everyone's going to miss, but like a lot of first rounders. I mean, I can't think of a wide receiver that they drafted, and they drafted a number of them that hit. None did. And so there was an element of saying, and all the GMs want, or all the coaches want to be GMs too, right? They want the ultimate power, which is what he wanted, which is what Parcells wanted, etc. But I think in one sense, like it was actually not the best arrangement for the Patriots and things like that. And I think it bore itself out in the draft because it was not a place where they excelled. I mean, they would definitely hit on later picks, but even if you take a Tom Brady, I mean, listen,
Yeah, that's an
six
anomaly
rounder,
too. Yeah.
absolutely, 199th pick. I mean, you're hoping that he might be a practice squad guy or sneak on, or sneak in. And it's interesting. You brought something up, Mike, that I've been thinking about for a while, and I know it's an economic. There's a very strong economic dimension to this, but when you look at guys like there was somebody who was traded, it was a first round pick like 2 or 3 years ago, and he was traded for a fifth round pick this past year or a sixth round pick. The value that you get back for players. Like when you look at trades nowadays, most of them are like sixth or seventh rounders that teams are giving up. They're not like there's the few elite ones like for DK Metcalf or
Right.
whatever it was, where it was a second rounder and a fifth rounder. But when you look at it, like Matthew Judon, who was on the Patriots and he was an all pro, the Patriots traded him and got a third round pick back for him from the Falcons.
Yeah.
There's a strange valuation thing. I think part of it has to do with the salary and managing the cap and things along those lines. But when you look at it just as from a value proposition, right? Like, why am I going to trade a guy who was a first round pick 2 years ago for a fifth rounder now? Like, it seems like the valuation is all off unless there's these other factors.
No. But that's because they're coming off the rookie deal,
Yeah.
and now they're going to make 2x, 3x that in their first
Yeah.
free agent contract. So they devalue themselves as their
Right.
salary goes up.
Yep. I think that's part of it, right?
Right.
And when I was doing some research for this, do you know about this Jimmy Johnson value meter? Have you guys heard of this?
Yeah,
I've heard a lot about
yeah.
Jimmy Johnson, not specifically value meter.
So
What's that?
basically, when he was the coach of the Cowboys, he came up with this notion of a value meter. So and the idea was to be able to put a value on players so that if I go to you and there's a minute left on the clock, part of it was dealing with the short time frame and the deadlines that they're up against during the draft. So basically, like he would say, okay, a first round pick is worth 3,000 points.
Okay.
And so he would go to another team and say, okay, give me two players that add up to 3,000 points on this scale, right? And then we know we have a fair value deal. So it was almost like a scorable game, if you will, that he was
Okay.
trying to put in place so that they would beforehand have an opportunity to sort of match value.
Right.
And again, we talked about some of the value stuff, right? It differs from team to team. It's not an objective standard because
Exactly. It's the
yeah,
prisoner's dilemma. But unless you have the same scale and valuation that I do, I could make you an offer that on my scale is absolutely 3,000 for 3,000. I could even make you
right.
one that's you get 3,500 and I only get 3,000. And I could say,
Yeah,
Josh, you're out of your mind. This is so fair. And you could
right.
be saying, Mike, you're trying to screw me. You screwed me last year in that last deal. You're doing it again because I have a different scale. And I say, show me your scale.
Yeah,
Now there's trust. Are you going to show me
yeah,
your scale? How you
right.
value players?
Well, I think the beauty of it, though, is and this is one thing I had read, the Jimmy Johnson scale. At the end of the day, everybody sort of comes back to it. I mean, everybody has their own scale internally,
Hmm.
but it seems to be the easiest way to communicate between teams. Everybody understands the Jimmy Johnson scale, and may not like it, but I understand it, you understand it, and we figure it out. So I think it's kind of a cool thing.
I
Hey,
mean,
how much?
it really is an objective measure, right? Like that was the idea, was to say,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
look at, let's try to create a measurable way of doing this so that we can move quickly when we need to. And like, and they would give, by the way, points to different draft slots, right?
Yeah,
So if I'm going to trade you a first round pick that's worth 3,000 points, I know that like a second rounder is worth 1,500, a third rounder is worth 700, and blah, 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 and we can piece together something as long as we agree on, what that point system is. But I think, Gerry, you're right, that I think teams have continued to kind of try to use it at least as a first pass, as an
Mhm.
objective measure of sort of getting a sense of what the value of some of these guys are.
what kind of how do you value being a good teammate? Like for example,
Yeah.
let's take another sport. Well-known person, Dennis Rodman, right?
Uh-huh.
Just absolutely, crazy. But if you needed a defender who could rebound the ball and didn't want to score but would pass, woo,
Yeah.
he's a great teammate to have on your team if
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
tolerate the crazy.
Yeah.
And he's one of the worst things to go against because he's tenacious when he's against you. So
Mhm.
how much do you think that factors in the negotiations of picks, saying I don't want just a 305-pound guy that runs a
Yeah.
5.45. I want that guy because of he doesn't go out at night and he doesn't party. He
Yeah.
comes home and he stays home and he's not going to be in the news. And then there are people who are in the news all the time.
Right. Yeah.
I
I
lived in
mean,
Vegas when they talked about bringing teams there.
yeah.
And I went, oh man, this is going to be a disaster. It's got a 24/7 city 365. You got all sorts of vices going on. And then when they got the Raiders, I went, oh, no disrespect
Right.
to my Raider fans,
Yeah.
friends, but there's not probably a worse organization that you could put in
Right.
Las Vegas
Right.
because of the temptations that happen there.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
much do you
Yeah.
think that factors into that 3,000 point valuation for this guy because of their personality test?
I do. I mean, I think it depends on the team. I think there are certain teams that are looking for the like character guys, and they're looking for the right fit and things along those lines that go beyond that sort of generic scale. Um, I mean, I do think, like with the Patriots, I mean, it was interesting because the Patriots drafted a lot of guys, aka Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski and things like that, that were a challenge. They were not choir boys by any stretch of the imagination, but the Patriots, and I think Belichick believed that his system would contain everybody. And it was interesting. I remember watching The Dynasty, which was on Netflix,
Yeah.
and they had footage of Aaron Hernandez like walking around. He wasn't playing, like he was on the sideline, he was hurt, but he was during their practices, he was like out in the middle of the field. And Belichick didn't like reprimand him or anything like that. And
Okay.
there were some kinks in the armor there where people started to see a little bit of unraveling because, Aaron Hernandez was such a strong personality and all of the other things that went along with it, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that there are teams who, it's not just fit. It's the Antonio Browns of the world are these elite athletes on the field, right? But do you really want to deal with the headache of all of these other pieces? So I think so. I think teams probably have different risk tolerances, which is what I think this comes down to,
Yeah.
right? And there's some teams that say, listen, this guy is such an amazing talent, let's overlook the risk. And other teams say, let somebody else deal with it. I don't
But
want to do that.
Belichick, he wasn't like you just pointed out, Joshua. I mean, you cited some examples, but he wasn't afraid of these challenging
Oh
characters. It
no.
seems like,
Cut.
Well,
other teams would dump him in a second. He'd be like, give him to me, I'll take him. I mean, and he worked his magic. So
he
I got
did.
to hand it to the guy.
He did to a degree because there were, that period between when the Patriots won the their first three Super Bowls, there was that gap, right? And then they won the next three. That gap was a period of reckoning that they didn't have the answers for everybody. And I think Aaron Hernandez was the absolute poster child for that. That they didn't have an answer for him. And he, was so disruptive in the clubhouse eventually that, they talked about trading him, they talked about finding a way to get rid of the guy.
See, I think
But
that's
even
it, Joshua. To
yeah,
link the 2 points together. Again, this is outsider's perspective, seeing what the
yeah, yeah,
Patriots had built.
yeah,
Belichick was quick to pick someone off the dumpster fire.
right.
I can plug him into my system, but he
Yeah,
was also quick. Hey, you're not working out here. We're going to trade you. He was
right.
fearless at when he found a wrong decision or bad decision or something that didn't work out.
Yeah.
He was quick to move on. What's the saying that I heard about him? It's his reputation was always a year too soon, never a year too late.
That's
He
right. And
he
and
would
I
not.
do agree with you. And like when he traded Richard Seymour, who had been an all-pro for a number of years with the Patriots and a great character guy and everything, people were like, "What are you doing?" But that's where I think he was brilliant in trades and free agency. I think he knew that guys were on the decline. He would trade off of name value. It's just interesting, and I like the epitome of like I think there was a little bit of a level of hubris with Belichick toward the end where like when he took Cole Strange, who nobody had ever heard of, in the first round, right? That pick was almost like, I'm going to take a guy and I'm going to show you all how knowledgeable and how smart I am. And this guy's going to succeed, and none of you saw it coming, etc. And that didn't work out at all. And I think that was, on some level, there was a little bit of a last grasp there of sort of
But
saying,
deserved. He earned
yeah, he
the
did
right to
earn it.
take that risk.
That's right.
And
Yes.
probably and this whole thing where he didn't, get in on the first ballot. You can say
Oh
what you
yeah.
want about the
No, no, no.
scandals
I
and the
mean,
stuff,
right.
but to not take the person with the most
No.
Super Bowls and put them in, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of this with the league, but
Yeah.
let's talk about it. So he makes a trade. He has a reputation. He's consistent, and he always finds a way to win.
Hmm.
If you're the other GM, so let's take this in negotiation terms. Are
Yeah.
you reluctant to do deals with Belichick because he's going to come out the winner, even if I win too? But the chances are he's going to win, I'm going to lose. And we're
Yeah.
doing this in public now, which is
Right.
a whole different take on negotiating. When we negotiate business deals, it's
Mhm.
not in the news. It's not Apple and Sony, buying
Yeah.
each other, stuff like that. It's I'm buying data center, I'm buying, widgets, whatever it may be, and it's never going to be in the paper.
Yeah.
No one's ever going to know our names, so we don't have the
Right.
ego factoring into the matrix of
Hmm.
being a good negotiator, not being embarrassed by someone who's a better negotiator.
Yeah.
So how
I
do you
mean,
think that factors in?
I
Belichick
would say,
calls and says, "Have I got a deal for you?"
yeah. Well, I think anybody's going to be skeptical of that, right? They're going to be worried because, when you win that much, they're going to be thinking there's got to be something going on here. But I think the teams that ultimately made deals with him and things like that, there was a level of confidence. They felt like they knew what they were doing. They felt like they had done their homework, etc. I think the teams that didn't maybe, shied away from that and were and allowed that narrative to get in their head that if I negotiate here with Belichick, somehow I'm going to end up losing and I don't want to lose, so I'd rather not even bother.
Right.
Right.
I think that happened. I think a lot of GMs didn't answer the call back because
Hmm.
they they knew the likely outcome is I'm going to turn this trade down, so I'm not even going to listen to the trade.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. One thing that I found really interesting, and this is so there's these two authors called Massey and Thaler who
Okay.
did this study about the loser, they called it the loser's curse. It was about the NFL. And what they found, they did research on basically teams that traded up um, always lost like that, and essentially because they fell in love with a guy, right? And what do we tell people, for example, if you're going to shop for a house, right? We tell people don't fall in love with a house because you're going to overpay, right? And that was their point here was that when you fall in love with a player and you trade up, you are very likely to spend way too much. And the very classic example, and Gerry is sitting laughing because of this example, is the Bryce Young trade. I mean, that trade was bananas. Like I was like, wait, I need to look and see because I remember it being a lot, right? And I was like, I need to look back and see what it was. Here's what it was. Okay. So the Panthers moved from number 9 to number 1. So they moved up 8 slots. Okay. So and they got the first pick. That's it. They gave up DJ Moore, who's a quality wide receiver, right?
Had him on my fantasy team. Yeah, very
Yeah.
quality. Yeah.
They had the 9th pick in the draft. Okay, so they moved back 8 spots. They got a 2023 second round pick, a 2024 first round pick, and a 2025 second round pick for 8 spots. Now, like that is insane. And I'm not sure how anybody, like if I was in the Panthers organization, I would be like, are you joking? You are not trading all of those picks for the to move up 8 spots. Like, no way. And I don't know where the value calculator was on that one, but it wasn't in play because it's insane. Like, really? Right? Am I wrong about this or
You know,
No, I think you're right.
and so let me factor something else in.
yeah.
Is the ego of the person being picked, because I think that impacts how they play on the field. I
Mhm.
firmly believe that if you there are some people who need to feel loved. We moved up to get you.
Yeah,
We are the same team. You put the
sure.
jersey on with the number one on it and the hat, and
Yeah,
look how much we love you already. And there are people who need that love to then decide, okay,
yeah,
now I'm going to give back. And then there's people, and maybe Tom Brady's one of them, who
yeah.
Belichick whispers in his ear and says, "Hey, listen, 31 other teams passed on you. I'll take you with the 32nd pick." Or what was the pick? What was it, 200 and something?
199.
199.
Hey,
Yeah.
listen, 198 guys were deemed better than you. But
Right.
if you want to pick up a ball and throw it, I'll give you the chance. And there are people who play really well with that chip on their shoulder.
Yeah.
If
And
I'm
he, by the way, I mean, to this day, he still has a chip on his shoulder. It's like you won 7 Super Bowls, like the chip
Yeah.
can come off,
yeah,
but it was fuel. It's fuel for him,
right.
right? And go ahead, Mike.
No, I think the that factors into the negotiation of all the Wonderling tests, the personality tests these guys have to do, um,
Yeah.
to pick the player who's going to play well in the environment. For example, there are players who play really well as the home team, and they play really well in the games where they're going to win anyway, and they've got extra confidence, and they go out and they just beat people up. And then there's players who play well on the road,
Hmm.
who love to go, these people hate me. Oh yeah, I'm going to show them. I want
Hmm.
to be the guy who ruins their day. So both these players come out of college,
Yeah.
and on one of them they don't play well at home, but they play well on the road. And the other one plays super well at home, but not well on the road.
Hmm.
In both of those cases, because there's an equal number of games on the road and at home, you're both going to end up at, was it 9-9? They play 18 games. But if I'm 9-9 with a player who loves to play on the road and 9-9 with a player who loves to play at home, I'm taking the player who plays on the road
Hmm.
because I'm going on the road at 9-9 as that wild card pick.
Yeah.
So now you're talking about picking guys not just on their value in the slot, but on their potential
Yeah.
based on how they're going to help your team or not, and your positioning or not. There are front runners. There are stadiums you do not want to play in December, right?
Hmm.
Nobody wants to go to Buffalo in December.
Yeah.
Everybody
Or
wants to go to
Chicago.
Miami or Chicago.
Right. Yeah.
Do you pick the Josh Allens because, wow, he's up in Wyoming? Ooh, if you can play up in Wyoming, you could play in any environment on the planet. You'll be fine. Versus picking somebody down in Alabama, who
Mhm.
maybe isn't. They don't like that cold weather. They're a little softer down there. Um, how much do you think that factors into the negotiation for the mental psyche of the player?
Well, I mean, I do think that, that is in my estimation. I mean, I think that's what separates, great players from all-time great players is the mentality.
Okay.
Brady had it, Mahomes has it, Allen has it. It's as if nothing can penetrate the mental toughness that they have. And then when you flip the script, and you see guys who really struggle, they're great players and they have all the tools, right? But they don't have that mental toughness, or you can see it. And I think probably the classic example was from the NBA was Ben Simmons, right? Ben Simmons was a great college basketball player. I think he was the third pick in the draft.
Okay.
Like, a terrific player, but mentally, like, could not cope with the pressure. And it's amazing that he's hung around the league as long as he has, because he's been there on pure talent, but he has the mental tough piece of it is missing and has been missing since day one.
Okay.
Um,
But let me ask a question about, because a great player and
mhm.
greatness in a player, what does that mean to each of you? How do you measure the greatness of the pick that you negotiated for?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Jerry,
Yeah.
you got an answer?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing obviously comes to mind is skills, accomplishments, blah, blah, blah. But I think, there's a lot more to it. And I think, Joshua, you guys were talking about the mental toughness. I think there's a lot that goes on in the head
Hmm.
that comes out in the body somehow. And so, really, the people that I guess I've admired or had maybe even become acquainted with, throughout my career, it's not only the skill, that's almost like a given, is the table stakes, is the accomplishments and skills, but it's the mental game they play. I think that's probably what separates the good from the great. So
Mhm.
could probably talk forever on that, but that's probably the simplest way to put it in my mind. I'm
Hmm.
open to see what you guys think.
Yeah,
I
Josh,
mean,
what do you got?
well, I mean, I certainly think great players, they are leaders in their own way. I mean, and I think there are different ways in which guys lead. Some are fiery, others are, kind of the quiet leader. Like a Drake May is not the kind of guy that gets fired up, but he's also the kind of guy that I think at a very young age, for example, just like Bo Nix, has demonstrated an amazing amount of mental toughness. Um, and so I think that there's A is being a leader, like especially if you're in that, if you're expected to be,
Wait,
um,
let me pause right there on it, because as I understand it, the small percentage of people who make professional athletes, first of all, they were all the captain of their high school team and
right,
probably multi-sport athletes.
right,
And then they were probably the captain of the offensive line, if they're an offensive lineman, or the defensive line on their college
yeah,
team.
right,
So when they get drafted, and I don't know what the numbers are, I will bet you it's at least 80% of the players drafted have a C
hmm,
on their uniform at
yeah,
some point in their career. So
right,
from a leadership check the box perspective, they've
yeah,
all technically been there or should have been.
yeah. But I think it's interesting because I think um, in one sense, like if you've all been the captain, right, it does become a little bit difficult when you join a professional team and you're not the captain, you're not the one that everyone's looking to. That's a challenge to your mental toughness. Can I be, it's a little bit like, when I would talk to some students at Harvard, and they would say, I was the top person in my class, and now I come here and I'm one of everybody else, right? So I think and that's another form of mental toughness, is being able to say, like, there's an established leader here, and I need to support without undercutting and all that kind of fun stuff. So I think that takes some effort. I do think, I mean, it's an interesting question because in one sense, there's the individual accomplishments that I think are one way to gauge. But then there's the team accomplishments. I think one of the things I always admired and respected about Brady was that he never lost sight of the team. And again, he was in a unique position because he was married to a supermodel that made, more money than he did and everything, right? But listen, the one thing I would say is this, like, there are guys who have had, contracts who have made $150 million, whatever, more than that, right?
Yeah.
And they're up for their next contract and they're like, well, I want 300 million. Like, you have enough money. Like, what's your priority at this point? And I think Brady, said, look, I want to win. And I know that if I take $40 million as the quarterback, like, that's going to hamper the rest of our team. And
Right.
so there's another element here, which is the team element of this. And I think that, there's that old adage that great players make the players around them better. And I think that is like when Tom Brady, to me, that's what he did. Julian Edelman was one of my favorite players. He was a great guy to watch, an amazing athlete to transform himself along those lines. But I don't know how he would have done without a Tom Brady. And that's
Yeah.
not a criticism at all of Julian Edelman. It's more that Brady had the ability to make these guys better, um, in the way that he approached the game and the way that he distributed the ball. It wasn't like I'm just going to throw it 25 times to Stefan Diggs. It was, I'm going to spread this around, keep teams off balance, things along those lines, right?
Yeah.
So I think the combination of sort of that leadership, the mental toughness, like, and to pull somebody from another sport, like David Ortiz was like nobody I've ever seen in my entire life. Every time he came up to bat in a clutch situation, I can't remember one time where he failed, which is
Right.
bananas in a sport where failure is the norm,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so like what made him great was, I think, too, the big moment. Like the big moment wasn't too big for him. It wasn't too big for Brady. It wasn't too big for Mahomes. And I think that has to be part of the equation.
Yeah.
Is how do guys treat the big moment?
I'm going to use a phrase that I use with my children. My children, I'm so proud as a dad, have now repeated it back to me. So I know at some point they were listening. It's have to versus get to. My kids will say, do we have to go to Europe again? No, you don't have to. You get to. You get to do things that other people do. To choose to get to be in the moment. Do I have to go up at bat? Do I have to throw this ball in the fourth quarter? Or do I get to go up with 2 out in the bottom of the ninth? Do I get to be in the fourth quarter with, it's the Joe Montana. There's an old story about him coming back against Cincinnati Bengals. And they were down and they had to win.
Yeah.
And he looked up and he said, "Hey, is that John Candy up in the crowd?"
Right.
Hey, let's just chill out, guys. We get like stars are paying to watch us. Isn't this an honor? Isn't this fun to be here?
Yeah.
I think that's a mental switch that everybody, it's one of those things that's simple but not easy to do.
Yeah.
I
agree.
And even
Joshua,
no, please go ahead, Jerry.
I just got to go back to your point. This really, once you said it, it really struck me because I've seen this over and over. Is a really great player, and I don't mean player in the sense necessarily of sports, but in business, in life, is that person who can make others around them better. I mean, that, and I've been in those situations around people who are like that, who want to make everybody around them better. And I'd like to think of myself as one of those kind of people because I have been around and been helped by those kind of people who have helped me get better. And I'm so happy you said it because it just, so many things flashed in my mind.
Yeah.
I just think that's so important. And then secondly, the guy who says, "Give me the ball. There's 1 second on the clock, and I'll take it over the goal line. Don't worry, I'm not going to fumble it. You can trust me."
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you mentioning the comment about those people who make other people better.
Yeah. But I mean, it goes back to better. Like, So when Peyton Manning had first come in the league, Edgerrin James was on his team, and they were going to give him a contract that was incentive laden. It was like the minimum, but it was like all these incentives for making over 800 yards, over 1,000 yards, number of touchdowns. And he came out and said, "That's not the deal you want." Or his agent came out and said, "This is not a good deal for the Colts." And everybody said, "Are you out of your mind?" It was some stupid number. Even though he's making the minimum, he was projected to make like top 5 running back money. And he said, "Yeah, but here's the problem. We're playing for a playoff game. The winner gets to go to a playoff game. And the team would benefit if I go out of bounds or if I don't score, if I lay down on the 2-yard line. But if I get that 2 yards and I get that touchdown, I make an extra $3 million.
Right.
Now we're in conflict. You better have your incentive-laden contract in line with the team goals. Because if you let the player based on stats, oh my gosh, look at all those sacks he got. Yeah, but if you put a sack leader against a Lamar Jackson, who's phenomenal outside the pocket, you're going to lose that game. Lamar, you want to keep him in the pocket slowly collapse it, take away
Mhm.
his decisions, and you might not get a sack, but you're going to get the incomplete pass. Well, no
Right.
defensive player gets a stat for an incomplete pass, but if you let that, that one edge rusher in and Lamar
Mm.
gets around, game over. So that's where there's the win is the thing. It's just, how do you grade a defensive lineman on a team win when Tom Brady's got the ball for 40 snaps a game?
Yeah,
It's really
right.
hard to grade that out.
Well, and I think the classic example of this is Dan Marino, right? I mean, most people consider Dan Marino to be one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, and yet he went to one Super Bowl, lost, right, and never went
Lost
back,
big.
right? Lost big, right? And he never went back, right? And so does that diminish, I mean, this is the age-old question of, does it diminish um what he did? I don't necessarily think it does. Look, I know there are so many things that go into winning championships, and I think that's one of the real challenges, right? There have been amazing players that have, played forever. And if you go to the NBA, the Karl Malones of the world and the Charles Barkleys of the world, who are phenomenal players and never won, right?
No ring.
Right. So there has to be part of that too is the organization you go to, right? Like there are some well-run organizations, and then there are the Jets. Sorry.
And
It's the truth though,
and
right? Like
Cleveland. Oh, Shador Sanders up to Cleveland. Look, we had him there in
Yeah.
Colorado. We got Coach Prime, and it's a whole show, and he
Right.
did wonderful things. And then he gets one teammate. Prime gets him to be the Heisman Trophy winner, and he's got his son who he's taken around
Right.
and gotten to be supposedly a top pick, top 5 pick, top 10 pick.
Right.
Didn't go in the first round. Oh, he just keeps falling. And Cleveland, don't you dare draft him. And then Cleveland, what was it, in the 6th round or whatever they were? They're
Fifth
like, oh
round.
yeah, we'll take him. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh God, this is, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I do think it is a little bit of, I mean, and look, people don't remember, but the Patriots were one of the worst teams in the NFL for a very long time. Like
Yeah, and the
when
Bears
I,
got a Super Bowl
yeah,
during that time against the
right,
Patriots. Yes,
right.
we remember
Super
it
Bowl
well.
shuffle.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
And
Super
and
Bowl
and
shuffle.
so, when people are like, "Oh, I'm so sick of the Patriots." I'm like, "Right, because they're winning now." It's like how people begun to feel about the Chiefs, right? Where anybody that wins too much, people don't want to see them anymore, and we're tired of that. I get that. But I think it also does come down to a commitment and a strategy. And I think, like that whole notion of do your job, that the Patriots mantra all those years of, and they meant it. The 53rd player on the Patriots was as valuable as some of the other guys. And I don't think other teams always see it that way, right? I think they say, okay, well, this guy's going to be on the roster. But they don't see a unique role for him in the way that the Patriots did for every player on their roster. And I think that was something that they did incredibly well. And they understood that you needed those guys to be quality players, because you were going to rely on them over the course of a season or something along those lines. So I do think, it's interesting because I do think, the quarterback for Oregon, he went back to college this year. And I think part of that is he looked at who was going to draft him. And it would have likely, like, again, I feel like I'm crapping on the Jets a lot here, and I am, but I don't really mean it. It's the New York Boston thing in me
Yeah.
that I can't quite get out. But I really like the Jets had the second pick in the draft, have it, right? And they clearly need a quarterback. And so I think he thought, you know what? If I come out now, I might go to the Jets, and I don't want to go there. I mean, it was the Eli Manning thing, right? I don't want to go to the San Diego Chargers kind of deal, or the John Elway piece of this, where these guys were sort of asserting that. And I think in part, like if we're going to be fair to the player, and at the time I thought, oh, they're being pretty selfish. Like you're getting drafted in the NFL, just be happy. But maybe they saw something about an organization and how an organization was run that made them uncomfortable, and said, in their mind, maybe they thought, you know what, I want to win. And I don't think it's going to happen in New York or
Well,
in San Diego or whatever. And so, like,
as we're all business guys, we talk about, the business of sport really starts
yeah,
at the 8-year old. They're in the quarterback camp,
yeah,
and therefore they all kind of know the next level up, because those are the players that are coaching down.
Hmm.
And all the way down. So Peyton Manning's camp has, the local quarterbacks for the local universities, and they have the high schools, and so they all kind of know each other. So you can't tell me that every quarterback on the planet doesn't already know, oh, that that general manager, that coach, that quarterback's coach, that offensive coach, that's their system. That's how they do things. That's how they communicate.
Right.
I don't like that guy. I don't know where you guys are stand on this, but I have one person who I am extremely close with who's a blue bubble guy, and I'm
Hmm.
an Android guy, and
Hmm.
it really bugs him
Hmm.
that my bubbles are green. Um,
Hmm.
so sometimes it's little communication preferences that dictate I have a better relationship with these people and a less good relationship with these people.
Yeah.
Um, and it gets around. Your reputation precedes you. So as we, kind of talk about this for all the business people out there, I think that's in life too. As negotiators, we have to
Yeah.
realize our reputation precedes us, and it's going to get out there.
Yeah.
If we're unethical, people are going to talk. They're going to find out.
Well, and I wanted to come back to the prisoner's dilemma element to the draft because I
Yeah.
do think it's fascinating. But I think to your point, Mike, right? Do GMs when like let's say they make a trade and it doesn't go well for them, right? Um, back to your point about Belichick, like those guys remember they think to themselves, "Hey, that guy screwed me the last time. Like, why would I do business with them again?" It's an interesting question about are they able to shrug that off, especially if they say, you know what, like last year we traded with Minnesota, we got screwed badly. I looked really bad, but like they've got this tackle that we really need. They've got a surplus of tackles. Now what do I do, right? Do I go back and take another chance that I can pry that guy away and maybe, or am I going to be plagued by that previous experience? And in the book that I wrote that came out last year called Getting Back to the Table, I talk about this problem, which is that when people experience a failure, um, in negotiation, they carry it around with them, or that's one response to failure is that you're not going to want to negotiate maybe in general because it was so anxiety producing, but especially like with the people who were part of your failure, right? Like you're going to recoil at the thought of sitting down with them again. It will impact you, right? GMs aren't going to admit that, but if I got screwed and the whole world said, "Hey, the Patriots won that trade," right? Um, how's it going to impact me going forward? Are the good GMs able to say, you know what, that was then, this is a different scenario. And I'm willing to go back to the well because I know this is what is best for the team. Or are there guys who, really do get gun shy and say, you know what, screw me once, that's the end. Like I'm not going to deal
Yeah.
with you again. I'm sure you get the different personalities, and it's a uber competitive
Oh
mindset that
yeah.
these guys have, right? Like these guys are not wallflowers. They are uber competitive individuals, which makes the sting of a loss of a trade or a move in a draft even more painful.
Right. Because they're
You
saying,
know,
hey, I'm doing my job. 300-pound guys are trying to kill me, take me out of this game. I'm doing my job on the field. You, GM, do your job off the field. Like I'm
Mhm.
holding you to the same standard I'm being held to. Let's
Right.
just go. Right. Sorry, Gerry, I cut you off.
no, no worries. But Joshua, I was just thinking, I've got my sensitive part too. And the way, and I hate to lose, I'm competitive, played sports. And the way I've done it with negotiation to try to overcome that, and I think I've been pretty successful at it, is I try to negotiate all the time. I try to practice because
Mm.
I'd rather fail with the waitress down at the local restaurant and
Mhm.
fall on my face where it has absolutely no bearing on anything
Mm.
rather than failing when it really counts. And so I take my hits, my failures, and my learning on all of these places, and I fail all the time. It's
Mhm.
just kind of fun. It's kind of a fun game. But so I try to get all the failure out when it absolutely doesn't matter, so that I've learned and I'm better and stronger and reduce my chance of failure when I really need to be successful.
Mm.
Just a little side
Mhm.
thought there.
Yeah, yeah.
I it is a skill Just like, quarterbacks don't go, I won the Heisman, I'm already good.
Right.
There's a reason that, there's so many career coaches out there. There's a reason that every athlete on the planet has multiple coaches. I have a dietitian, I have a weight room coach, I have a quarterbacks coach. They all have these coaches, and it's because you got to keep your edge and you got to keep improving. And I think as a negotiator, I think that's also important, that we keep our edge, that we keep trying, keep improving in life lesson, I guess, not just a negotiation lesson.
Yeah.
And actually, that goes back to Michael Jordan. There's some famous quote of his, I can't remember, about all the bad, things, missed shots and everything else he had in high school and college, games that he lost on the last shot. Got all that out of his system. He got into the NBA.
Right.
One thing I will say, though, going back to like valuation and things like that, I think one of the problems is that teams don't put a quote unquote value on a player. I think this is something that the Patriots talked a lot about, that they would put a value on a player beforehand. And then because you get basically entrapment, right? Like you fall in love with a player, and so you lose sight of their true value. And I think one of the things that Belichick was famous for was saying, this guy is a third round value. We will not take him before, or after. Like that's the value that this person has. So they define the value. And that is the way, as we all know, like that's the way that you stay out of entrapment kind of problems, is by putting a value. It's like, when you go gamble, right? And you lose and you think, okay, I'm just going to take out some more money because I'll win it back and whatever, right?
Surely the odds are going to change.
There are people I know who say, I'm leaving my ATM card at home because if I lose, I'm going to have that tendency, right? It's the pre-thinking that helps you. And I think the one thing the Patriots never did was overpay for players. Never. They said, this is the value and we're going to stick to it. And if we lose out, we lose out. We get that. But they understood that if they didn't do that, that they would fall into this trap, right? Of falling in love with a player and overpaying. And the reality is that you can't win in the NFL if you do that.
So let me tie this back to some business negotiation lessons, because it's near and dear to my heart. First of all, it's a life lesson too. Never fall in love with something that can't love you back. Right? It's just a deal. It's just numbers on a page. It's just a slot. It's just a pick. But in the NFL, it is a person, so they might love you back. But I guess it's having a plan, understanding what your plan is, and being willing to walk away. Knowing that my BATNA to get the next guy that might be graded number 9 instead of number 8. But if I get number 9 in 2 rounds later, maybe I can underpay for a person who's just marginally less. And if I motivate them properly, I might be able to get as much or more out of them by using, hey, by the way, we picked you 2 rounds less. So now we're just talking about trading values all the time and making sure that every trade you do, you have a plan for, you're disciplined, and you're always trying to get value for any concession you make. You're trying to get some value back. And that's a, grow the pie situation. I don't know how much you can do it in the NFL because it's a lot of one-to-ones, but it's about having leverage too and making sure that you're the person who people want on their team. You're not in the headlines for the wrong reasons. You're in the headlines for the right reasons. Anyway, listen, guys, we've been on for a little over an hour now. Can you stay on longer? You want to? What's your timeline look like?
I've got about 10 more minutes if that works.
Yeah. Let's wrap it up in the next 10 minutes. That'll be great.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Do you guys know? Does the NFL teams hire negotiating consultants? And do you know of any?
We work with several pro teams, but not on the player side, and the with the GM side. We do a lot on the revenue side for season tickets and things like that. Is it a question of when we meet the right person, get introductions, because we don't pursue it, maybe, or it could be, what I always tell people is I am not a lawyer. I stress that because, and I tell people, do not negotiate with lawyers unless you are a lawyer. because
Yeah.
there's very specific things within the practice, within the precedent and case law, and the continuing education that they take. They will burn you. And then being a lawyer who is also qualified to be an agent, that's a whole different level of certification. So
Mhm.
it's perhaps that we don't have the right certifications to do that. Joshua, have you heard anything about that?
I haven't. I mean, I think the interesting dimension to sort of an offshoot of the question, I guess, Jerry, is that is players representing themselves. Um, and I think that going into the draft, I do think that's a hindrance. I with a friend of mine who is an agent who focused on tennis and boxing and things like that. She and I wrote an article about the Lamar Jackson negotiations with the Ravens, because he was representing himself and what were the pros and cons of doing that, right? And I think one of the dimensions that came through quite clearly is that, the Ravens said to him, "Hey, feel free to go out and get offers, um, and let us know what you find, right? And we'll think about it if that's the case about the possibility of trading you or something along those lines." What was interesting was, first of all, this is where I think agents have great value is they have connections. So them going to, teams and saying, "Hey, this guy's available, yada, yada, yada," and working the relationships that they build. I think the best agents, build relationships with teams. Not all, Scott Boras doesn't, and things like that. But um, but I think that
And yet he still gets massive deals for the people
he
he
still gets
represents.
massive deals.
Yeah.
But there are interestingly enough, as was talking to somebody who said that there are some teams that have said we're not going to deal with Scott Boras. Like it's a lose-lose proposition because even if we get the player, we're going to overpay to a point that doesn't make sense. And we get caught in a bidding war and the escalatory spiral. And so we're just not going to do it. Now, again, who knows, right? But one of the interesting other parts of that was the compensation element. Like if a team had signed Lamar Jackson, they would have had to give up 2 first-round picks. And that was actually the real reason why no offers were made to him by other teams because they didn't want to have to give up those first 2 round picks. I mean, look, quarterback is the core position in the NFL. We all know that you can't win without it, right? And so you have a guy who's arguably a top 5 quarterback. You'd be thinking, why are these teams not rushing out and making offers to him? And part of the answer was that the compensation was beyond what they felt like, was reasonable from a value point of view. Um, so, in that sense, it's a different answer to your question, Jerry. I mean, I don't know of teams that do bring in negotiating consultants. Maybe they do, um, but I haven't heard of any that do in that
Yeah.
way.
Just
It,
curious.
Yeah,
and
no,
here's
it's
what
I
I found
mean,
in the industry. There's a lot of people who think they're very good negotiators because they've gotten so far in life.
right.
They've already been doing it. So clearly they know what they're doing.
Yeah,
So there's a reluctance to bring in a coach, even though the GMs are the ones who approve the budget to hire more coaches. So
right. Yeah.
perhaps and there's a lot of people who teach negotiating now. It used to be a small field, and now anybody can say, "Hey, I teach negotiations." And maybe they're all teaching the same stuff. I don't sit in that many classes. I sit in a lot. I learn a
Mhm.
lot. Um, so I like to think back to your other point, Jerry, is like Phil Brown. He runs negotiation practice sessions, and I pop in there a couple times a year just
Mhm.
to get in a session that he is facilitating, so that I can get his feedback and learn from.
Yeah,
But I think there is an ego on that side that, well, I'm already at the top and I negotiated all these deals already, so I must be good.
right.
But what is good? You paid the most for the player. Oh, look, I wrote the biggest check. Is that a good negotiator? I I'd
Yeah.
almost think that the person who writes the smallest check and gets the player is a
Yeah.
better negotiator.
Oh,
Um,
I completely agree with you, Mike. And in fact,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I've had this conversation with a number of friends over the years about, in particular in baseball, because there's no cap, obviously, right? There's no hard cap. And so for me, the GMs of like the Billy Beans of the world,
Great
the
movie, Moneyball.
right? the Chaim Bloom's in Tampa Bay, like those guys are the guys that I would want. Like, and it was interesting, like right with Moneyball, you saw that the Red Sox tried to hire Billy Beane because of his approach in formula, whatever. It didn't work out, and it was fine because Theo Epstein was phenomenal. But I think the point is that those guys, in my mind, are far better negotiators because if you make one mistake, you're screwed. If the Yankees make a mistake, it doesn't matter. They have enough money
Right.
that so like, to me, it's like put that person in the Tampa Bay Rays system and see how they do. And that's going to tell you how good they are at their
Boy,
job or not.
good
The
point.
guy, Andrew Friedman, the GM of the Dodgers, with all due respect, I don't know him at all, but when you have more money than God, like anybody can win a World Series. I'm sorry. Like, yes, you'll have hiccups and maybe
The
you'll
Yankees
lose.
are having struggled with that. They have a lot of money and they haven't won the World Series.
That's true. That's true. But I think that like the guy, it's the same kind of principle. Like when we talk about like say Henry Kissinger, right? By all accounts, Henry Kissinger was an amazing negotiator. But if I can bomb you, right, to get you to come to the table, well, is that skill? No, it's not skill, it's power, right? And we see that
Yeah.
in a lot of scenarios, even, fast forward today, right? Like where people, different negotiators are using maximum pressure because they can, because they're so much more powerful than other countries that they can force their will, right? Well, if you say to me, is that guy a great negotiator who does that? I would say no. Like great negotiators know when to use their power and when not to. And
Right.
and I also think it's like, to your point, Mike, like if I can sign a guy for less money because we persuaded him to come here because it's about winning and all this kind of stuff, like that to me, that's the guy that I want because I think that's skill.
Right.
Like
Right.
that's persuasion, that's influence, that's not we have, additional resources or other ways of making you do things.
Right. Well, and let me wrap that into the business context of so some of the companies I worked for had really big names: General Motors, Raytheon,
Mhm.
MGM in their space. So that I'm going to call leverage. That's
Mhm.
that's having bombs.
Mhm.
I have volume and I have a name recognition that you, the salesperson, want on your logo, on your
Right.
PowerPoint when you say we serve these people. So, but that's not Mike's leverage as a negotiator. I didn't do anything other than I got the job at these companies. So when I approached into a negotiation, there was the leverage that I already had, but in my brain, I was always thinking, how can I create leverage beyond the logo that I represent?
Mhm.
Because I'm being paid. I always consider it a fiduciary responsibility, even though it's not technically by law fiduciary. When somebody pays me to represent them, I want to deliver the most value possible for the long term, which includes making sure the other side is happy, however you want to phrase what happy is, happy enough to do the
Mhm.
deal. They don't
Yeah.
want to be forced into a bad deal because then they're just going to give me a problem later. So then
Mhm.
how do a business negotiator, how do you create leverage that isn't there because of the name you represent? And it's things like having a BATNA.
Yeah.
If I can not just have one supplier who really wants to do business with me, but if I
Mhm.
can find two or
Right.
three that meet my qualifications,
Yeah.
not the high risk startup shops that'll give me any price I want, but are legitimate counter offers.
Mhm.
And then if I can, the studies show that every decision has an emotional component. But
Mhm.
I have been blocked by a person online because I asked the question on a histogram. You've got a person on a bridge at 3 a.m. having an emotional crisis. You've got a person buying a red Porsche. You've got a person sourcing a marketing initiative, and you've got a person buying blow molded injection parts from 5 different pre-qualified suppliers. On an emotional scale, are they all the same? And they wouldn't answer the question. And I'm like,
Mm.
you're out of your mind if you think the person on the bridge is having the same emotional decision making process
Yeah.
as a person who's sourcing from a commodity
Right.
from 5 suppliers who are pre-qualified.
Right.
There's a much more objective component to that. So what I always wanted to do as on the buy side is primarily what I represented is not fall in love with deals, to be authentically indifferent.
Mm. Hmm.
So if I like these suppliers, that's great. And I can like you, Josh, and I can like you, Gerry, and one of you will win my business. But as long as I don't go, oh, but I really want Gerry, and I'm gonna tweak the objective metrics, and I'm going to weight quality a little more, and I'm going to weight because that's going to come out in his favor. As long as I'm not letting my cognitive bias or my emotional bias
Yeah.
impact the objectives,
Yeah.
and I can come across and say, Gerry, I really like you, but the number on the table isn't good enough. And I can say, Josh, I really like you, but the number, it's not in your favor. Finance is saying no. I've got a budget issue. If I can be authentic in that indifference and not lose my credibility by bluffing,
Hmm.
then I always felt I had a lot of leverage
Yeah.
because I could
Yeah.
move from
Right.
1 to 1A without a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of angst.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that there's something I think most people should do in negotiations is not fall in
Yeah.
love with the deal. Not No disrespect to the folks who wrote Getting to Yes, but if people who try too hard to get to yes don't stop and think, should I?
Right. For sure. Yep. You got it. Makes
All right.
sense.
Well, hey, listen, we're right up against the hour.
Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time.